And then it just dawned on me, man, what about Abbey Road? Wouldn't that be cool? So I called a friend of mine in London, and he calls me back. He says, yeah, they're still operating, but they're really booked up except for one day. I said, book, I'm flying over. So next week I went over to London, and that one day was, man, it was like a surreal dream, because the studio was exactly intact as it was when the Beatles were there. And the inspiration was like through the roof. The sound was the best I've ever heard in my life. Okay, so that one day turned into 3 days. I had 3 days of pieces done, and then I was fully booked after that. So I said, I'll go back to New York and record the rest of the record, but couldn't match the sound dynamic, quality of Abbey Road. It was just a second. I had to go back. So I waited for that time to go back, but in the meantime, I took the time to arrange the rest of the music. So I wanted to get away and rent a house somewhere where I could just get the best work done when I'm alone, right? So I rented this house in a place I've always wanted to go, the Hamptons, out in eastern Long Island. And I opened the paper, I called the guy up, and I said, look, I'm looking to rent your house, and since you have a little ad in the paper, he goes, well, I don't know who you are, but you sound like a nice guy. I said, wow. He goes, look, if I rent you the house, you have to be really cool, because your next door neighbor is like a big star. He doesn't want to be bothered. I said, well, no problem, mate. I'll call you back to confirm. He says, so he calls me back. He says, you got the house for 5 days. I said, oh, great. I said, what about who was next door? He says, Paul McCartney. This is not made up. Although I could have made this story up, right? But I didn't. So I GPS, I go out there, and there's McCartney. And I get to talk to him, meet him, and tell him what I'm doing and everything. He goes, who are you? And I went, tell him. I didn't tell him who I was. The next year, I had the CDs completed. And at the time, my fiance, who's now my wife, Stephanie, yeah, she's responsible for so much of all the good in my life right now. And all of the back screen video and everything. She's just an integral part of my whole existence. And that's for sure. So anyway, she said to me, she goes, why don't you just write Paul? Like a couple of paragraphs of what the Beatles meant to you growing up. I said, hey, great idea.